Hi, fifth grade social studies teachers. My name is Kelly, and I'm going to talk you through the Revolution and our Constitution unit for fifth grade. This is the fourth unit and has 13 lessons. It should take somewhere between 23 and 27 days to complete, depending on the assessment format. There is a unit question map linked so that you can see how the unit was structured around the compelling and supporting questions. And also, we have a unit slideshow for this unit. Students spend the first part of the unit learning about the American Revolution in order to understand how we arrived at the Constitution. Students then get to analyze the Constitution and figure out how the government is run, what responsibilities were given to the government, and what responsibilities were given to the people. Time is spent exploring the concept of rights and how not all people living in America were given the same rights, and this topic continues in later units throughout the remainder of the school year. Just like in the previous unit, we have a good collection of standards, including inquiry standards, behavioral science, civics, geography, and history standards. We also have ELA standards listed that correspond with the social studies unit. And then here are all our unit objectives and learning targets for the students. And as you can see, we focus a lot on the disciplinary concepts of the compelling question, a little bit to do with the American Revolution, and then we dig into the Constitution and this concept of rights and responsibilities. Here's our unit compelling question. What rights and responsibilities do I have as an American citizen, and how did I get them? Here you can see our 4 supporting questions. How did the colonies gain their freedom from Britain? How was our government established? What rights and responsibilities are listed in the Constitution? And did all people living in America have rights and responsibilities under the Constitution? And again, this unit is broken into chapters corresponding with each of the supporting questions. So Chapter 1 lessons go along with the first question, how did the colonies gain their freedom from Britain? In this lesson, students are going to focus on some of the basics of the American Revolutionary War and build up that background knowledge. So in Lesson 1, we're going to have students start by looking at an image, which is this one right here. And students are going to complete a WDIS, so analyzing the image, marking out what do I see. And then they also can do a QFT, which stands for Question Formulation Technique. And I would recommend just doing a short version of a QFT if you choose to do so. Simply have students write a few questions that they have about the image. The main focus for this image is the idea of protesting for equal rights. So then what we move into when we consider what the 4 main social scientists would wonder about that particular image. So this is a good time to review the Thinking Like a Social Scientist cards. Then you move into talking about the compelling question and using the rights and responsibilities theme from throughout the years so far. Then we're going to focus on the disciplinary concept, which just means which of these different types of social studies disciplines would connect with this question. So the political scientist and the historian are going to be the main ones. In Lesson 2, we start learning about the beginning of the war, so we spend time on Lexington and Concord. If you want to talk about Paul Revere, that's wonderful, but make sure you're really focusing on the accuracy. Paul Revere is not the one who actually made it all the way to the end. There were 2 other writers as well, and he never said the British are coming. He wouldn't have said that because he himself was British. He was living in the British colonies, so he wouldn't have yelled anything like that. It might be kind of fun to talk about some of the inaccuracies in all of the folklore surrounding Paul Revere's Midnight Ride. In this lesson, you get to explore a battle map of Lexington and Concord, so this might be one that students haven't seen before. You can explore the legend and understand what the arrows mean and the red marks and the little battle symbols. Then in Lesson 3, we move into this concept of taking sides. This was touched on a bit at the end of the Colonial America unit. So we have the Loyalists and Patriots. But what we didn't talk about before were the groups who weren't necessarily the main groups involved in the war. Lesson 4, we learn about the Battle of Trenton. And again, we have a historical map that we can check out. Lesson 5 is the Siege of Yorktown and the end of the war. As you can see, we don't spend a lot of time on very many battles. This moves pretty quickly because while we want students to understand a little bit of the battle concepts, it's not the main focus. This is purely background information to understand how we went from colonial America to developing a constitution. Chapter 2 lessons are all about the Constitution and focusing on the question of how was our government established. So we're going to focus on the preamble, the first 3 articles, and the separation of powers. We also talk about the process of ratification. In Lesson 6, we learn about the Articles of Confederation, and we learn about the strengths and weaknesses of the articles and why that resulted in us creating a completely new constitution. We also can spend some time focusing on the issue of representation with the Virginia Plan and the New Jersey Plan. In Lesson 7, we talk about the Constitution, and this is one that can link to any of the Constitution Day lessons that we do earlier in the year. And we spend time learning about the preamble, understanding that it sets up the purposes of the Constitution and the government that's created. One thing that's kind of interesting, the National Constitution Center has an interactive constitution that you can play around with and find out more about the different parts of the Constitution. In Lesson 8, we work through the separation of powers activity from iCivics. This, of course, is one that you can link directly from iCivics if you have one of the free teacher accounts. So the separation of powers is a game on iCivics that kiddos can play, and then there's some lesson plans that go along with it to help students better understand the balance of powers and who gets to do what. In Lesson 9, we talk about ratification with the iCivics activity Race to Ratify. Within the Race to Ratify game, students play as a Federalist or an Anti-Federalist and try to gain enough support for their side to either ratify the Constitution or not. Lesson 10 focuses on the taking informed action aspect of the 5th grade social studies standards. In this lesson, students work through and learn about some of the democratic processes, such as voting or lobbying, and what it means in order to try and get their particular solution passed. As the students move through this activity, they begin by brainstorming some classroom problems that might need to be solved. Then they work together as a class to determine which one will be the focus. And then students get to work in different roles as a representative, as a senator, or perhaps they're a member of the executive branch. Then as the students move through the activity, they can see how their idea can transform into a bill, how that would move between the different branches, eventually becoming a law or a rule for the classroom. Chapter 3 are all about rights and responsibilities that are listed within the classroom. So students will spend a lot of time learning about the Bill of Rights and how their rights and responsibilities balance at different levels, so the community, the state, and the national level. Again, we reference iCivics. There's lots of strong lesson plans on here, and we focus on the citizen me to understand the different levels of government. There's a pyramid that students end up making, and it works through the different levels of nation, state, city, school, and home for various topics. Lesson 12 goes along with the iCivics activity called Do I Have a Right? And this is a lesson plan that has quite a bit to it. So as you can see, there's a recommended sequence where you begin by reviewing the definition of right, then talk about how the Constitution has many fundamental rights. Then we go through some of the amendments, and then there's a writing prompt that you can do or not do. And then there is a review option to kind of talk about the different aspects of the rights in the Bill of Rights. Then I would recommend that students have plenty of time to play the Do I Have a Right game. It might be helpful to start it as a whole class so that students can understand the aspects of it, and then either play it with a partner, small group, or individually. Chapter 4 goes along with supporting question 4. Did all people living in America have rights and responsibilities under the Constitution? Within this lesson, students are going to analyze the Constitution to figure out if everyone living in America at that time were granted the same types of rights and responsibilities. So in Lesson 13, we talk about freedom and equality for all, and we use the rights and wrongs worksheet. Again, some of this comes from an iCivics lesson. So we talk about this idea of what is present in the Constitution as well as the constitutional compromises. Students can read the material and use that to help answer the questions on the document. After there's been some time on the worksheet, have students explore more about whether or not different types of groups had rights under the Constitution. It could be fun to have a little class discussion about the rights and wrongs of the Constitution. And then we move into a formative, if you so choose, and the summative. The current summative is to create a picture book focusing on the various aspects of the Constitution and the concept of rights and responsibilities. If this is the summative that's going to be used, I would recommend passing out the graphic organizer to students pretty early in the unit so that they can take notes and start creating the summative as they go along. I hope that this video was a helpful resource for you as you prepare to teach this unit. Please feel free to reach out to your PLC leader, instructional coach, or curriculum facilitator if you have any questions or would like some more information or support.